Welcome. There's Keri.
Hey, we don't waste no time. Not today. Okay. Oh wait.
We're gonna make her wait.
Wait. Don't go away.
Okay. We'll bring her back in just a minute. All right. Welcome to All the Things.
That makes me think about this song. And they'd be like, "Come back." Oh, I can't sing. I'm not gonna sing it. But the words were, "Come back to me. I'm begging you, please." That's a song before.
Can we start the show?
Yes.
We got new people watching, and this is the beginning.
Womp womp. There's all right. That. Hey, welcome to All the Things. I am Monique Dusan.
And I am Krista Bontrager.
This is the show where we talk about all the things related to God, life, and the Bible.
Yes. And helping us on the show tonight is Bob Bontrager.
He has a camera this time. Yes.
And there's Emily.
Yes.
Our guest chat box moderator, and a very large thing of Clorox wipes behind you.
Moderator extraordinaire.
There we go.
Yeah, hashtag not sponsored by.
Yes. Okay.
Anything else you want to point out in the background?
But we just believe in disinfectant.
Yes.
Because hello, no Rona. Yes.
All right. So you can join the conversation tonight on the chat box on YouTube. Would love to have your voice over there. You could just go to Theology Mom, my channel, Theology Mom, and you can jump in on the chat box there. And Emily is there tonight helping us out. Oh, and Jeremy's there. Oh, very good.
Hey, Jeremy.
All right.
Yes. Come on through.
Yes.
Yes, we are also on Facebook. You can find us either through the Center for Biblical Unity or Theology Mom or All the Things. We do have our own Facebook page as well.
Jeremy says he's looking forward to seeing Keri's hat tonight. I don't know if she's going to wear a hat.
I don't know.
She frequently does. So we'll see. This is your opportunity to have audience participation. As you're on the chat box, be sure to hit the thumbs up and make sure that you're also subscribed to the channel, because sometimes YouTube likes to unsubscribe people randomly. So you think you're subscribed, just make sure that you are subscribed. Turn on those notifications.
Now, wait a minute. So, they in the chat box getting rogue already. Tell her to wear a hat or we riot. I am not mad at you, though. Go ahead. Yes. Woo, live chat. Yes. We need Keri in a hat. Yes. Let's do this, folks. We won't riot. We will peacefully protest. Ooh, they strong tonight. Yes. All right.
Well, this show is brought to you by the Center for Biblical Unity, the Theology Mom podcast, and Family 210 Clothing. And you can get your swag.
Yes.
You can by going to centerforbiblicalunity.com/merch. There's the official shirt for the Center for Biblical Unity.
With our mission statement on it. One race, one people, one Savior.
That's right. And I think I had a picture. I don't know if Bob has it in the queue of, not that one. That's okay. We don't have it. That's okay. I sent it to him a couple days ago, but we'll get it on next week. Somebody sent it in. But we have $5 of every purchase goes toward helping the Center for Biblical Unity as we're getting launched and trying to raise money for development of new resources. So last Sunday you spoke at Living Truth Christian Fellowship.
Yes, out in Corona, California.
Yes, our friends John and Claudia Kalmakoff brought you out there. It was an in-person thing. And there you are talking about the LA riots.
Yes, I am talking about the LA riots. I actually lived through the LA riots. And it was a really good time. The people were super supportive, had a lot of good questions.
There you are at the Q&A with the pastors.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yes. And I was
wearing some very nice heels.
I love those heels. They're super comfortable. But the chair was a little tiny, and I was like, I feel like I'm asking a lot out of this chair. Lord, be with us. Yes. But it was such a good time. Their Pastor Michael Lance, super hospitable and welcoming. Just a really good time overall. I was really sad because you were supposed to be there with me.
I was still not feeling very well. I'm okay now. I had a little mix up with medication that I take, and I got very, very sick, but doing better now. And I'm just wondering, what did you talk on at the church last week?
I spoke about critical race theory. So,
okay.
Race and justice. I'm not sure what they call the talk specifically.
A little bit about your story.
A little bit about my story. A little bit about my walk out of critical race theory, like where I learned it, my walk out of it. What is critical race theory? Why does the Bible offer a better answer for critical race theory? Why does the Bible offer a better answer for unity than critical race theory?
Yeah, very good. And people are asking on the chat if the talk was recorded, and it was. You can go on the church website and check that out, Betsy.
Jeremy, you coming strong tonight. I see you. Monique must have been about 6'6" with the heels and the bun. Yes, I am easily 5'9" with no shoes on. And so when I wear a good pair of heels or a platform wedge, I am easily 6'1". I tower over most, and I don't mind that. I really don't. I like being tall.
You like a good heel.
If you could see my closet, I do like a good heel. Okay.
All right, so tonight's guest, we have an amazing guest tonight.
Yes.
Is Keri Smith. I first discovered her a month or two ago. She was on the Dr. Carlin, I'm going to butcher her name, Borshenko podcast on YouTube. Dr. Carlin is an organizational psychologist, and she has a great show that kind of a little bit about her journey. She often comments about white fragility and some of that impact in the workplace and just other critical race theory and social justice-y types of comments. Well, she had Carrie on her live stream, and Emily actually sent me the link. It was like, hey, you got to check this gal out. And I'm like, what is this? This is fantastic. So reached out to Carrie, and she's graciously willing to come on our show, even though she's traveling. So let's get her on the Zoom machine here.
Yes. Hey,
Carrie.
Thanks so much for coming on.
Well, thank you for inviting me and for being so patient with my tech problems.
Oh,
Any
no.
delays today were my fault, just so everybody knows.
No problem.
No worries.
Now we should let people know that Keri is one half of the very popular podcast called Unsafe Space. Mm-hmm. And so we want to encourage people to go check out her podcast, and you might find some content. If you like our show, you might enjoy their comments as well. And we'll make sure to talk more about your podcast at the end too. I want to get people connected with you, Keri. But you've had some interesting guests on there, so we'll talk more about that at the end and what you and your podcast partner are up to.
Yes.
But let's maybe just start with a little bit about your journey, your background, and how you started traveling down the road of embracing the social justice framework.
Sure. Like you said, I currently host Unsafe Space. I'm a pretty new Christian, and my partner on the podcast, Carter Laren, is an atheist. So we have some interesting conversations. Although the purpose of this show is not to debate the existence of God, but we'll sometimes get into things. I was raised Southern Baptist, and I started walking away from that faith and walking away from God really probably between the ages of 16 and 19. It was a slow transition. And then when I went to college, I went to Duke University, graduated in 2000. So over 20 years ago, I was majoring in one of the sciences, but my minor was in women's studies. That was back when they still called it women's studies, which is a no-no. Now they call it gender studies. But I was doing that. And I was also volunteering for Amnesty International. And so I started being what I call indoctrinated into the social justice faith at that time. And looking back on it, hindsight's 2020, I can definitely see how it functioned as a religion for me. It was a system of faith. It gave me something, it gave me a moral code, and it gave me rules to live by. And it gave me a sense of purpose because it tells you that this is a way to end sexism and racism. And so you feel like you're engaged in something very meaningful and you're helping to make the world a better place. And since I've walked away from it, which interestingly enough, it was also maybe a 2 or 3 year transition to leave it. Since I started walking away from it, I've had some people who kind of incredulous, I guess people who were never in it, kind of incredulous that it took me 20 years, but hey, slow learner here. I guess, does that answer your question? So it started in college. What I've seen happening since then, though, is that it's now, especially since I became a Christian, I've started to notice that it's in some of our churches. And I think that's fascinating because I think it's so, I think it's the opposite of Christianity in a lot of ways. I think it's collectivist. It's not about an individual relationship with God. I think those two things are opposed. So I find it interesting that it's in the church. But on the other hand, I think there's something about a church that might make it a good breeding ground for this kind of viral belief system, because people are going to church because they want to do good and to make the world better. In some cases, they're looking for purpose and meaning. So.
I agree. And I think that
Can you relate to that?
Yeah, I relate a lot to it. That 20-year mark, like this is a worldview that I upheld for nearly 20 years. And something that I learned in college, and I was actually at a Christian university.
Wait a minute, you held it for 20 years too, Monique?
Yes.
Wow. Okay, good.
Yes.
I'm not we're good.
Girl, come on, no. So yes, like upholding this worldview for such a long time and doing work to promote justice. And I was a Christian. Like I went to a Christian university. I learned a lot of the tenets of the framework at my school. And to me, that gave me the reason or the motivation for, upholding this structure, because it's just like you said, people in the church, they want to do good. They want to do justice. They want to be biblical. But if we're not defining our terms right, and we say this a lot, if you're not defining justice correctly, according to a biblical standard, you're going to be fighting for all kind of things. And yes, what you're saying really resonates with me. Now, you say you left the Southern Baptist framework, and did you leave all of Christianity? Did you move over to a different tradition?
No, I guess I consider myself an agnostic. I never considered myself atheist because to me, atheism seems almost like a religion. It would require me to say, I don't know. It would require me to say that I know there's not a God, and I don't know that. So I was always what I would call agnostic for those 20 years. But I definitely became pretty anti-Christian in some ways. So I was very mocking towards people who believed in God.
So you were you would have described yourself as not being a Christian at that time, but you still upheld a view of things that you genuinely wanted to make the world a better place. You thought you were doing something noble by trying to work toward ending sexism, racism, and other injustices. Would you say that almost became like a religion for you, or a like you said, a value system?
Absolutely. It was a value system. I think it borrows a lot from Christianity. It has you guys have probably talked about this, and I've heard lots of people make this comparison, that it has a concept of original sin, which is privilege. It's something similar anyway to the concept of original sin. You're born with privilege, right? And one difference is that you are born in this religion. If you think of it like a religion, you're born with varying degrees of privilege. So not everybody's born with the same amount of original sin. And the one thing that's interesting though is that there's no grace. No one's told me, made a good analogy for me yet to as grace, something like grace in this religion. And there's no deity, of course, but people go out and preach it. I went out and I was almost an evangelical for it. I preached it the way that some people preach the word. And it definitely gave me a sense of being a good person and, my life being meaningful. I even sought out a career where I could push it in my work. So I managed comedians. My partner and I had a company. I managed comedians. She managed musicians. And for the most part, I tended to work with comedians who shared my worldview. So it was very important to me that I I thought, this is great. I'm working with people who are using laughter to educate or to spread this belief system.
I feel like you're like my long lost friend that I just never met. Hi.
Hi.
Well, because a lot of what you bring up is so true. Like the idea of grace. There is no, in my opinion anyway, like real form of grace. Like if you mess up, you have to pay. You need to be doing the work constantly. Mm-hmm. And especially if you're a white person, if you're doing the work of anti-racism, and now you become woke in my eyes. If you go down the street and meet somebody else who's a person of color and they don't feel that you're woke enough or that you've done all the work, then you still need to be doing work. If you mess up and you say something accidentally, or maybe I personally take it the wrong way because that's a trigger for me, then you're automatically deemed a racist. There's no apology. And especially within the Black community, there's this idea of Black forgiveness. And, how do you extend Black forgiveness without the idea of grace? There really isn't. And yeah, so I like how you put that. But can you talk to us a little bit about like your guiding principles for upholding this worldview?
Like what
were some of the big ideas that you believed? Like you talked about sexism, racism, like kind of build out that framework a little bit more.
So I really believe this is a form of Marxism, an evolved form, not evolved as in better, but evolved as in like a mutated form of Marxism. So Marxism of old, and I'm not going to get too nerdy. I can't anyway, so don't worry. Marxism of old basically said that the best way to view the world was as a competition between groups, between classes, between people, different class groups for wealth. And they believed in redistributing wealth. And so this kind of identity Marxism says the best way to view the world is as a competition between identity groups for power. So they've substituted identity for class and they've substituted power for wealth, but they want to do the same thing. They want to redistribute power. It's still collectivist. They still look at you based on which of these groups you're in, and they teach you. Here's the crazy thing. It says it's against racism and sexism, but if you get down to the bare bones of what they teach, and they're starting to be more open about this, they teach you that you must treat people differently on the basis of race and sex and sexuality and all these other identity markers. So they're teaching you how to judge people and treat them differently based on what identity groups they're in. The way that they get people to, here's what's really crazy about it. And the more I look back on it, again, sometimes I wonder, how could I have been in it for so long? But they get people with good intentions who want to end racism and sexism. They get you to preach what I believe to be a racist and sexist ideology by changing definitions. They're very concerned with changing the definitions of words and coming up with new words. And so they've changed the definition of sexism to mean prejudice plus power, the definition of racism to mean prejudice plus power, so that your brain can do this mental gymnastic kind of thing where it's like, okay, it's impossible to be sexist towards a man. I now accept that. Or it's impossible to be racist towards white people. I now accept that. And then you feel okay about judging and treating people differently on the basis of race. But the thing is, it's not just sexist towards men. It's sexist towards women too, I think. And it's racist towards everyone, not just white people. Like I'm in a group on Facebook. I still stay in some of the social justice groups, the ones that haven't kicked me out. I like to see how they're evolving their magic words, and that's what I call them. But this one group I'm in, it's amazing. It's mostly white women, and you will see them sharing these struggles they're having where they've now accepted this belief system, right? And so they are treating everyone based on what race they are. And there will be white women in the group who are like, I just can't make any female friends of color. I just don't, how can I, make friends of color? And then they'll give the worst advice to each other. So like one woman was in this group recently saying, here's a great example of what I think is wrong with this in your interactions with individuals. She's like, yeah, a new woman just moved to my town, a Black woman. And I wanted to get to know her, but I started to ask her where she was from. And I remembered that that's a microaggression, that's racist. And then, and she was going through the questions or like what she couldn't ask this woman. I'm like, you're treating her like she's different than you would treat a white person. What's wrong with you? Like, it's making you treat her differently. And you're preventing yourself from maybe developing a relationship with this person because you're zeroing in on her like, woman of color, I must become friends with you. Like, what questions are acceptable? It's so weird. And it makes everything artificial, and like it makes you so self-conscious. And the weird thing is, while you're doing this, you're like, I must not be racist, while you're behaving in a racist way. You're like literally treating her differently.
I'm curious, like, I know Monique wants to jump in. I'm just curious because we've noticed something on our Facebook experience on social media and other places, that white women seem to be particularly vulnerable to falling into some of these thought patterns. And they're very well-meaning, but they actually end up kind of acting in condescending ways toward people of color. I'm just wondering if is that my imagination or
no. And it's a lot of very wealthy, I would say upper middle class, highly educated white women. I mean, that's not all, but I think they're very susceptible to it.
Yeah, like, and this is a little bit off topic. Like, did you see those dinners that people were paying like $1,200 for to have a black person berate them? I'm not even gonna lie. Y'all can pray for me. I kind of was like, does somebody want to sign up with me? I'll pick something up. I can tell you, maybe, I was like, that's a lot of money.
I know.
I was like, oh.
I have a friend who said, if I were an unscrupulous person, I could be making a lot of money right now.
A lot of money. I am like that. You want to pay me $1,200 a head? I will cook you some food for $1,200 a head, and I will tell you some things. I will. Now, okay, this whole thing of, like asking all these questions is this a microaggression? I have to treat them differently and things like that. To me, that really promotes this idea that I have to bring myself down in order to be able to interact. Like, I have to remember, like, this is literally where I am. And so now I have to bring myself to this place so that I can have an interaction with a person of color. It's like the framework itself automatically sets white people up to believe that they are a little bit better than the person of color. Am I tripping? Like, am I wrong? I don't know.
No. Have you read Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility?
I can't even.
I know.
No, you
read
it.
I have read it, and that's why I cannot even.
Yeah. She admits, this is an interesting thing Carter and I've been trying to pull apart, is that maybe it's more attractive to the white people who are attracted to it. Maybe it's more attractive because they do she admits to having racist thoughts, and like, and then maybe it's more attractive to them because it relieves the burden of individual responsibility for whatever's wrong with them. And then it's like, oh, we're all like this, white people. And it makes me think of like during the Me Too movement, when some of the men who were getting, Me Too allegations, one was Morgan Spurlock came out, the director, and he did a Me Too confessional kind of post where he confessed to every woman he felt he had mistreated or harassed in some way. But what was weird about it was instead of just taking individual responsibility for what he was saying that he did, he was like, we men this, we men that, men. I'm like, no, just you, dude. Like, just why are you trying to? It's attractive, I think, for people because it relieves this personal burden of dealing with whatever it is. I think some people who are into it, like Robin DiAngelo, are projecting. I think she really does have some racial superiority feelings, and this is her way of, she thinks this is good for everyone to work through it in this way. But they're not ditching, as you point out, Winnie, they're not ditching the racial superiority stuff. They're teaching now that like meritocracy, individualism, being on time, a strong character, that all of these things are functions of whiteness that is so racist. Like we were looking at this list the Smithsonian put out at one of the museums about white culture, and we're like, oh my gosh, who else would dig this list? White supremacists would dig this list. Like,
yeah, we did a video about that. It's on our YouTube channel. Just looking at that in detail of just like, wow, this is deeply problematic. Our friend Jeremy has a question for you, Keri. He wants to know, when you were managing comedians, did you find SJW comedy to be funny? Do you find it funny now that you've left social justice ideology?
I did, actually. I know the easy answer is like, no.
I didn't even know SJW comedy was a thing.
Oh, it's everywhere now. You look like you with a knowing smile, Monique, that it's everywhere. Yes. When I first started doing it, when I first started working in comedy, it wasn't popular, but this ideology has become mainstream. And so now televisions, they just, whatever's selling, everyone starts pitching that thing. So I worked with comedians who were, I would say some of them true believers in social justice, but now you have a lot of comedians who are just speaking social justice because that's what's popular now and that's what they think will get them a TV show. But yes, to answer your question, it just depended on the comedian. Some were up there saying things I agreed with, but I didn't think they were funny and never laughed. And others, the ones I tended to work with, I thought were really funny, and I still do in some cases. Here's a good joke. I'll give just as an example. You can say this is a comedian I used to work with, W. Kamau Bell. He definitely is still a true believer in the faith of social justice. But he had this joke about, he said, he would do this joke about how Black people invented all forms of music. And then he would say, "Oh, you don't believe me?" Because somebody would shout out like country, and he would say, "Okay, let me show you with a mathematical equation. Country music," and he'd write it on the board. Country music equals the blues minus slavery. That's funny. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, that's funny.
See, I've never aspired to be a comedian, even though many people have told me that I should go into comedy. I would call myself like the equal opportunity racist. And I would talk about everybody. I could literally, I'd talk about Black people. I'd talk about white people. I don't care where you come from. I'm going to talk about, because every people group does something weird and ridiculous.
Yes. You know what you should call your group? Equal opportunity offender. Does that sound like a good? Yeah.
See, and that's better than equal opportunity racist. But that was when I was in the heart of it all. I was an equal opportunity racist because I could easily point out all of the social justice stuff and say it, and people weren't. And I mean, I'd say stuff to my Christian friends, to my non-Christian friends. It didn't matter. One, because I was a woman of color, and then two, because it was just funny. It just, you know.
It's
so
funny.
When you were involved with social justice, I mean, did you really, sometimes I feel like these people are so busy being behind their keyboards. I sometimes wonder cynically, like, do they actually do good things? Like, or are they really trying to make the world a better place? Like, for you, was that a motivating factor that really helped shape and guide your life, that you were helping the poor and really doing things to overcome the problems that you saw in society?
So a lot of the people in it, like myself, thought we were doing the work. But when I look back at the work we were doing, it was mostly spreading the ideology. Mm-hmm. I wasn't donating to charities. I was donating to activist nonprofit. I was donating to Planned Parenthood. You know, I was donating to the HRC, LGBT organizations, but I wasn't donating to the poor. And I worked with a lot of nonprofits, a lot of social justice related nonprofits. I was on the board of a few, but I also used, when my comedians went on tour, we would do partnerships. So they would promote my comic to their entire mailing list. And some of these were very large organizations like the HRC. And then we would do ticket giveaways. We would do VIP packages where you got to do a meet and greet. So we would do things where we were raising money for them, and then they would also bring people to the show. So it was a win-win for both of us. But I definitely helped to promote a lot of organizations that, in retrospect, I think were spreading, and again, an ideology I don't think is good anymore. But I didn't do things like go volunteer at a soup kitchen or, things like that.
Now, in Monique's case, she was involved in social service for 20 years, helping the homeless. So for you, it became...
But you were a Christian social justice warrior.
Yes.
Yes.
That's interesting.
Yeah. I was totally a Christian social justice warrior Christian, and did things that I thought biblically, this is what I should be doing. And even if those things biblically were, the water was tainted. And so because I believed in choice, I feel like in the Old Testament, maybe it's Joshua, maybe. I'm not the theologian in this relationship, people. It says like, you have like today I put before you like life and death. To me, that was all about the idea that humans must choose. And what I believed in social justice is that we have to be choosing to be anti-racist. All we have as humans is our ability to choose. And so that 45 steps later meant that women should be allowed to choose what they do with their body. And so then I was a proponent for abortion. And I remember having that conversation with Krista, and she was like, you what? Yeah, like she literally could have been like knocked on the floor with a feather. She was, wait, you say what? But it was all of these. Calm. It was all of these things. I remember even having a show with someone who was an ex-feminist and all that, and her saying, "No, we can't support abortion." And I'm sitting here like, wait, what? And asking questions about choice as I was still coming out of the world.
Yeah, and we should let people know that are new and watching the show because of Keri being a guest is that your journey out of critical race theory is still fairly recent.
Yeah.
It's fairly new. And so Monique came to live with us about 2 years ago when she came back from the mission field. And I
was a missionary upholding this. It's a little special.
And so when she came back from the mission field, she had been attacked a few times on the mission field. And so she had mission field induced PTSD. And so she came to live with our family, and I was her primary caregiver. And so the only thing I knew to do with her in the beginning was we would go on walks together like a couple times a day. And I thought, well, I can't hurt.
We walked like people in the New Testament. I mean, we was walking forever. I was like,
I didn't know what else to do with her.
I cannot walk anymore. I was literally 20 pounds lighter. I'm like, Lord, please heal my mental health because I cannot keep walking.
I'm not a doctor. I'm a theologian. I didn't know what to do with her. So I kept taking her on walks.
Here go Nineveh. And I'm like, I can't, please, I don't want to walk anymore. But yes.
So we would talk, and I started realizing like, well, yeah, even though we both graduated from the same Christian university, we had totally different worldviews. And so as we were walking and talking, I started questioning like, you believe what? Like, how did you arrive there? And I remember one walk where she said like, all white people were racist and all people who were Republicans were racist. I'm like, what kind of view is this?
I was so serious. I could just say
what we were talking about.
I love this though, this picture you're painting of, because it sounds like it was the first time you were hearing some stuff.
I didn't know what this was.
But I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. And so I just thought, well, we graduated from the same Christian college. She had been a missionary. So I made all these assumptions about what her come from was, what her worldview was. And then I started realizing she's got this really weird mix of like secular ideology that I don't know what this is called, mixed with Christianity, and it's all kind of homogenized in there together.
And I just thought she needed to decolonize her faith.
Yes.
That was it. If you decolonize your faith, you will understand. And truly, you shall be saved.
And so one day she's praying for our family that we'll repent of our sins of whiteness. And the Holy Spirit says, well, you need to repent from social justice.
Yeah.
And really?
Yeah, it was a rough moment. I was like, clearly something's wrong. If I could have spoke with upper management at that moment during my prayer, I'd have been like,
can I speak to the Father?
Yeah.
He might outrank the Holy Spirit.
Yeah. But okay, so that's a little bit about my walking out of this. How did you walk out of this? Like, what was the shift and turning point for you?
That's a good question. Because people write to me and ask me all the time, how can I help my child or my girlfriend or whoever get out of this? There's not an easy answer.
You got that right.
I do say, continue to love that person, even though you disagree with them, and definitely disagree firmly, but love them So if and when they come out of it, they've always felt welcome with you, But so with me, I was going through a very dark place personally. I was going through a divorce. I lost my sense of identity completely. I didn't know who I was anymore and what I wanted. And because ultimately, I think this ideology, even though it functions like a religion, I don't think it fills that God-sized hole. And it's ultimately empty. And I was struggling with meaning. I was struggling with what I wanted out of life. Do I want to keep doing this career? Do I want to get a divorce? What do I even believe about anything? I became obsessed with trying to figure out if I thought we had souls or not. I remember being at the gym one morning at 7 a.m. I'm like texting my friend at the gym, like, do you think we have a soul? And they're like, it's 7 a.m. Like, why are you bothering me? But I was really, just became obsessed with this question. And so I was in the darkest period of my life, and I had started going to a spiritual center in Los Angeles. It's called Agape, and it's really large. It's the preacher there, Michael Bernard Beckwith, does a lot of stuff with Oprah. It's like one of Oprah's favorite preachers. And it's definitely kind of like a combination of, it's not denominational. It's maybe a combination of mindfulness and new age stuff with Christianity, and it's very open. And that's the only door God that's the only door he could open that I would walk through to get back to Christianity. And so it's very interesting to me, the path that I took, because I was going to that spiritual center for a while, and it really was what I needed to hear at the time. And then side by side, as this was happening in 2016, I went down this rabbit hole of videos on YouTube, videos of Trump supporters being attacked by people who were supposedly on my side, so liberals and progressives, people being bloodied, hit with bricks, there's the one video of the woman being pelted with eggs, and it just emotionally wrecked me, because I had not known this was happening, and I felt a responsibility, because it's like, this is my side doing this. And this isn't liberalism, and this isn't progressivism or love or tolerance. This is hate. It was watching hate, and it was watching people be bloody just for going to a rally of a different politician. So that really emotionally impacted me, and it made me start questioning some things. I think that when you talk to people who believe in the things I used to believe, you're not going to reach them with cold hard facts. You can rattle off a bunch of facts. You have to figure out how to talk to people's emotion and tell them a story. The first thing that I remember making me question things was that night, that emotional trip that I took watching these different videos. And so this was happening side by side. And I continued going to that spiritual center. I started seeing other things politically that made me doubt some of the stereotypes I had held about Republicans or conservatives or people who were not in my social justice echo chamber. And I started seeking out other opinions. After Trump won, I really started trying to figure out why he won. I didn't get it. I was one of those people that cried the night he won. I was so shocked and devastated. But I wanted to know why he won, because I thought, well, if we don't want him to win again, we have to figure this out. And by that time, I had started opening up my echo chamber a bit, and I was listening to other points of view. And of course, I was chastised by people in my social justice world for interacting at all with any other opinions. You're not supposed to listen to people who disagree with you. You're not supposed to read their books. You're not supposed to read Thomas Sowell or listen to Ben Shapiro, or, there's just a whole list of people that you're not supposed to interact with. And
I remember going through that with Monique too, because I would say, like, well, you seem to think that all Black people think the same way. Have you ever listened to Thomas Sowell, or, what do you think about these Black intellectuals? And she would just say, well, those people are crazy. And I said, well, have you ever read them? Do you know who they are? And she's like, no. And I'm like,
same.
I find Thomas Sowell very thoughtful. I would be curious as to what you think of his ideas. And she just thought I was cuckoo. And so I was kind of breaking the echo chamber just by existing I guess now looking back, I don't know.
I think that's true. I think you did break some of the echo chamber, and that was, it was definitely needed. But I agree, or I can resonate with you, Keri, because I started having interactions with others, and it made me start to think, well, wow, this is racist. I had an intern at work, and I remember her coming to work crying. And
she was white.
She was white, young girl at a Christian school out here. And she came in and was just telling us about how the students of color were treating white students. And I was like, well, this isn't right. Like, if I'm holding against racism, I do want it to be against all people, not just against people of color. People of color are my primary audience because, you know, I've seen so much injustice historically against people of color, but I don't want whites to experience racism either. And that's when, I mean, along with my conversations with Krista and, you know, being in prayer and things like that, but I won't forget that conversation that I had with her and understanding, like, there is something extremely dangerous being promoted from this worldview right now.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so interesting to hear that it was conversations you were having. I wonder what it is about you that this is a question I think about a lot. I wonder what it is about you that made you able to see that was whatever it was that this girl was telling you about was wrong. Because they tell us that or they were telling me it's not the same thing. Or I would have probably said to her at some point in my life, you know, first of all, you can't use the word racist. That's not racism, that's prejudice. And secondly, like, you're making a big deal about this. You're making this all about you, and you're centering whiteness by even talking about it.
I think it was the relationship that I had with her and just the ability to listen and listening past certain words or just being present with her. And yes, it is, you know, the conversation of, well, she's probably just being fragile, or she probably is just shaken because now someone is decentering her whiteness and her whole world is probably just turning upside down. But it was different. And I don't even know, maybe it's because I had, you know, started to have some shift because of my conversations with Krista, or because I was being challenged in my relationship with the Lord. But there was something specific about that conversation with her that really clicked. Not in my head. I feel like in my head, there were other conversations, but in my heart, seeing her broken as a broken human, a broken image bearer, that really like struck me.
So it's your emotion. It's your heart. That's what those videos did for me. It was my heart was involved in it.
And I think too, like, both of you sound like you really have a heart for justice. And I know that Monique really, like, that is the driving force of her life. That's why God created her, is to be a stand for justice. And so it had never occurred to her to think about it, I think, from the perspective of a white person who was going through that. And I mean, when she and I first started talking, she told me I was just being fragile. She told me that, you know, me crying was just white tears. And
I don't think I ever said white tears.
Okay.
I said white tears.
You know, but there's a possibility, but I mean,
but I think that for me, I think maybe the relationship is kind of what got to her. I was like, she couldn't just write me off as somebody behind a keyboard, behind a computer, somebody that she didn't have to be in relationship with. We lived together.
I remember us sitting in my car in front of the driveway, and you are bawling your eyes out because you're like, you think that I'm racist. You just called me a racist. And I was so utterly confused as to why she couldn't see it, as to like how, but why wouldn't you think this way? Like, why are you crying? Like, what? Can't just be stronger about this, you know? And she was so broken, and I am so sorry, because that's not that wasn't the intent of the come from, I don't think, at that time in my brain. But that was the impact, and that was, in some regard, like what the intent was. It was to really prop up this worldview.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I'm sorry.
We both made mistakes. We both learned along the way.
That's what I like about when I finally found the Christian church, or went back, found it again. I had this idea of what Christianity was from when I was a child, and it was this, which definitely there are people who are Christian who are like this, or say they are, whatever. I had this idea of people who think they're better than you and holier than thou, and try to put on airs about, like, you know, how perfect they live. And this one church that I was going to for a while in Austin, I walked in the doors and I felt God there. I cried like the first time I went to Agape, and I just felt like, oh my gosh, this is a place full of broken people like me. And that's okay. Like, they're not here because they think they're better than everyone else. They're here because they're broken. And that's one thing my mind changed about Christianity. So when you're saying, you know, we've both done things, I'm like, that's what I love about it. That you can just.
Monique and I have a saying with each other.
Done.
Yeah, Monique and I have a saying with each other. When we make mistakes, you know, there's grace for that. And, you know, that's because Christ has extended his grace toward us. And so maybe you could tell us a little bit more about your journey back to the church and into Christianity and what that has been like for you.
Yeah, I have to credit Michael Bernard Beckwith at the Agape Spiritual Center was someone I started listening to. I read Eckhart Tolle, who's kind of writes about mindfulness, and his book, The Power of Now, really impacted me and helped me start to see things differently. Jordan Peterson, who did a whole biblical series where he talked about books of the Bible as allegory. So even if you're not a Christian, how you can look at these stories as lessons on how best to interact in the world, how to be in the world. And his lecture about Cain and Abel really stuck with me. And at that time I was thinking, you know, well, I'm not a Christian, but I think he's got a point here. These are some of the oldest stories known to man. Why have they survived? What's important in this? If we pass it down, like you pass down DNA, there's something here that there's wisdom here that we should learn. And so I started looking more at the Bible, and wow, because I had been in that dark place, and I really am a person, I don't know about either of you, but I'm a person who has to learn things the hard way. And I started looking at the Bible. I'm like, oh, Jesus was trying to help me so I didn't have to learn things the hard way. like, oh, and here's some rules you could live by, not because I'm trying to restrict your freedom, but because you are going to hurt if you have to learn these things the hard way. That's the way I started to look at it. Like, this book is full of good advice, not to be restrictive, but to help you and save you pain. And I think that was when my heart started opening to, like, hearing God. And so since I've become a Christian, so God has spoken to me. I don't care if anybody's watching who's not a Christian. That makes me sound like a weirdo and you don't believe me. That's okay. I know it was God. It wasn't an audible voice. I've had 3 moments where I just felt like everything made sense. It was this euphoria and joy, but also tears. It's weird, like all wrapped up together. And God likes to talk to me at the grocery store for some reason. Like going about my business. Like, yeah, one time I just was in the store and I was not focused. I was not being present. My mind was on this argument and on this thing from online and I just had this moment. There was this little girl in a shopping cart who smiled at me as I walked by, and it just was arresting. Now, something like that can happen 100 times in your life, but there was something about it where I just felt God was like telling me something, like, get out of your head, like, be in the moment and be present. And it's hard to explain. I don't know. That's the way. I also know people who say God has talked to them with like a vision, or I know friends who've heard an audible voice. So none of that's ever happened to me, but I feel like God talked to me in a way that I could hear. So.
Yes, I agree. We're going to go to some comments. I'm going to start out with Annette's comment. She said, "You were mean, Monique." Yes, I was. I was so mean. I will address it. I will admit it. And I said in the comments, thank God for grace, and thank God that not only God, but Krista offered grace and forgiveness. And I think it's also easy to point out when somebody's being mean. It's harder to say, wow, like she, for whatever reason, had her own experiences, had her own, come from and things like that. But the latter is what will get us to unity. The latter is what will bring us truly to a place of being able to stand with one another. I can call out somebody who's mean all day. Krista was mean to me. Let's just be real. You know what I mean? She was mean to me too. Hell, we was being mean to one another. I just had a little bit more. But yeah, if we want to, and I can recognize my meanness. I think I said it earlier, and I apologize for that. Please forgive me. And there's nothing wrong with that. I've apologized to her 100 times before. Just earlier today, actually, I had to apologize. Let's be clear, people.
We all,
but there's tons of grace and experience that goes into things. Like, why I upheld this worldview doesn't mean that it was right, but why do people cling on to something so tightly? Is that
I think we have to recognize that, and Carrie, I'm wondering if this is what's true for you, that, it's an emotional thing when you're changing worldviews. It is hard, and you're wanting to hang on to it, and it's like a tug of war, and the rope is starting to slip out of your hands, and you feel like, what's happening to me? And I remember there were a few times where Monique felt like, I feel like what you're telling me is so many things I believed aren't true, and I don't know who I am anymore. Yes. And that she was emotional. I was emotional. We cried together. We had fights, because we were both there were changes I went through too. Like, there were things that I had to learn. There were things about our history as America that I didn't know. There were things that I had to wrestle through in a deeper way in my worldview. As a theologian, I'm trained to think about questions a certain way, but there were certain questions I hadn't wrestled through yet.
And me studying sociology and counseling, there were questions that I asked, and I asked them from a completely different way. Yeah. And you would ask me all the Bible questions, and I was like, dang, she don't think I just don't know the Bible. But I didn't, you know what I mean? Like, I was the Christian who could quote off the social justice Bible verses, but I couldn't really thread out the rest of it.
Because when I would kind of drill deeper with, like, well, what does the context say? Or, how do you square that with this other scripture? She would I'd
be like, why we got to bring in the other scripture? Why you playing? Yeah. Anybody got time for the other scripture? We talking about Ephesians. Why are you talking about Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John? No.
But I don't know. I'm just wondering, was that an emotional struggle for you as you kind of felt that shift happening and some of your beliefs were eroding away?
Yeah. And I tell people, there's a great book that I read by George Lakoff. It's called Don't Think of an Elephant. It's very short. He's a linguist, and he wrote this book, I think it was somewhere around the time after George Bush won, and I was so angry. And I read this book because it's a book that he wrote it for an audience of lefties and liberals to explain why people on the right would hear facts and disregard the facts and keep their narrative structure. His blind spot was that people on the left do this too, just as well. They can also disregard facts if it doesn't fit their narrative structure, but it's a great book. And one of the things it made me think of is how if you hear a fact that doesn't line up with your ideology, you think of your worldview or your belief system or your ideology as like a house. And so a fact that doesn't fit, it would require you to almost raise your house to the ground. It's not like a simple remodeling job.
Right.
My house was raised to the ground. My whole belief system, the whole way, the glasses that I would put on to look at the world were social justice, identity, Marxist classes. Everything was filtered through that lens. Everything. And so you're always looking for the racist angle or the sexist angle, and you're always looking for oppression. And it's always, I interacted, I experienced sexism for sure in the entertainment industry. But there were times where, in retrospect, I did myself a disservice because I would walk into a room and automatically assume that anything that made me uncomfortable was sexist, that there was some sexist, I was looking for it. And I went in with this chip on my shoulder, and it hurt my self-esteem in a lot of ways because I was always looking to be the victim and assuming the worst of people instead of the best until proved otherwise. And so I'm losing my track of thought. But it is emotional because if anybody has a friend or family member who's in this belief system, it is foundational. It's like what their house of belief is built upon.
And I think you've made some comments, and I've heard some other people make comments that once you kind of go down this path, I've studied some Scientology as a result of my background in theology and just studying it from like an academic research standpoint, not because of I'm wanting to convert or anything, but
y'all don't have to pray for us. Okay.
But I study a lot of different religious systems because of my background in theology. But I sometimes I feel like the practice in Scientology of, cutting people off and shunning, I can't remember what they call it, but they have a term for it. But sometimes in talking to some social justice oriented people, it becomes kind of cult-like and this whole like kind of canceling of relationships. Monique and I get so many letters from people, especially parents who are just crushed that their children no longer speak to them. Canceled. They've canceled the relationship almost, and they're being shunned. There is kind of this cult-like mindset that can creep in. Do you feel like that's an overstatement, or have you observed that as well?
I've definitely observed that. We did an episode of Unsafe Space where we went through cult characteristics and we checked off the ones we thought fit, and it didn't fit every single cult characteristic. It doesn't have like one charismatic leader, for example, but it did fit a lot of the characteristics, including they encourage you to cut people out of your life who are not part of the belief system. And I did that. I had a carefully cultivated echo chamber online and in real life. And what's interesting now is, now that I'm out of it, a lot of my old friends have unfriended me. Of course, I lost a lot of friends, but not everyone has. And I'm still friends with some people who are true believers in social justice. And I'm still friends with them because my co-host on the show, Carter, he was never in social justice. He doesn't have, I think, the same patience that I do for people who are in it. And so he'll say, like, how can you have dinner with that person? They're pushing this evil Marxist belief system of the world. It's like, because they're still friends with me.
Yeah.
That means there's something different in them. They're not the social justice, or maybe our relationship is strong enough and they love me enough that they're resisting cutting me out. If they're not going to cut me out, then I'm not going to cut them out. Because I want to be that soft place for them to land if they ever decide that they're wrong. And because I know they're in it. Like, I'm thinking of a particular friend. I know she's in it because we share the same goals of ending bigotry, ending racism and sexism. It's just that I think this ideology has convinced her that's what it's about, and it's not. Mm-hmm. And so, but I know she's in it with good intent.
Yeah.
And so if she can one day maybe she will come to agree with me that this is not the way to do it, but her values, her goal is still the same. So.
Yeah, that's so good, because what's one of the things Monique and I are always talking about with the Center for Biblical Unity is people might fall into this error, but we want to maintain a posture of kindness, graciousness, patience, living out the fruit of the Holy Spirit with people that we as Christians, even though people treat us badly, we want to respond with kindness, with care and concern, because they're still human persons. And, they might even be brothers and sisters in the Lord. And, we want to engage with them from that perspective and to see their heart, that they really are, many of them are motivated by the right motivations. How can we step into keeping that door open? We like to talk about like kind of being an invitation to come back, keeping the door open so that we can keep that conversation going.
Yes. Chris is such a better door opener than me.
No.
I feel a need to confess something though, now that you said that. So with friends and people that I know in real life, and we have that bond, I definitely try to keep the door open as long as they're willing to. I'm willing to. But I am pretty tough on people, public figures who push it.
Yeah.
I'm a little different because especially when they do it behind the pulpit, and they push it in Christianity. And I still wrestle with whether I'm too aggressive about that.
It's hard. It's hard. And as Christians, we love Christ's body. The church is the body of Christ. Monique and I have a lot of conversations about that balance of how do we defend Christ's body. We don't allow people to come on our Facebook page and be talking smack about the church.
Smack. Go ahead. Yes.
But I mean, we try to really protect, people that are there to learn and grow and everything. And so we don't allow that kind of engagement, but we also want to create a space where people can come and disagree with us in a thoughtful way and have civil discourse with each other. Yet some of these thought leaders, I know Monique struggles with that too. Like she wants to just call them out.
I can sit here with a nice little necklace on and, but really in real life, like I don't come for the family. And I feel like many people in churches, in some churches, not every church, in some churches, well-meaning are putting things out there. And it's so like dehumanizing to my brothers and sisters in the faith. And it's like, why you got to come for the family? And then, as Krista mentioned, like our Facebook page, like we want you to, be able to engage and interact. But I am more just cut and dry. Don't do it because
we don't want this poisoning.
We don't want this poisoning the well. We don't want this poisoning people. And so it's like, you can you can ask a question, share your thought, but when you, and then you have the whole conversation of trolls and things like that. But when people want to come to your page and like post, you need to read the new canon. Here are 9 books. Don't think about what they say. At that point, I feel like I just got to cut you off. Like we are not going to walk this road today.
I completely, that resonates with me because, maybe it depends on the day that you get me. You don't go to the gym every day. Some days you slack off. Maybe you slack off many days in a row. I feel that way about spiritual practice a little bit, or like some days I feel good. I feel like my walk has been good, I guess put it that way. And then other days I'm like, oh, I have a lot to ask forgiveness for today. Like I did not go to the spiritual gym.
No, I feel my spiritual practice is being Peter. Let me cut off your ear. My spiritual practice is not today's Satan. Okay?
I like it.
That is it. Like, you gonna come for the family. I'm Peter. I'm just gonna cut off your ear. Wendy Crane in the comments said, Paul got a little aggressive and named names. Yes. Sometimes you gotta cut. Let me cut off your ear. Come here. No, that's wrong. Sorry.
That's definitely a part of my personality.
Since we're naming names, let's talk about Kendi.
Oh
yeah.
And your tweet. So we got the tweet here that you did a couple of days ago. Because this came up this week on Facebook, so I thought it was a good opportunity to address it and have you help us. So the CEO, no, that's not the right one. I wanted Keri's tweet. There it is. So there was this constitutional amendment that Ibrahim Kendi proposed. Maybe we should start off by, Monique, you can tell us who Kendi is. Like, what's his jam?
He's an anti-racist. He wrote the book. I think he wrote Stamped, and he wrote How to Be an Anti-Racist. I want to say he's a sociologist, but I don't think so. I know he has his PhD, but I'm not sure what. But
a lot of pastors are recommending this book right now, and so we've had a lot of people write into the ministry asking us like, what's our opinion on this book? And then there was this thing on Politico. Is that what it was? You have the Politico piece? Yeah, there is.
Politico, yeah.
Yeah. So he has this, he wants to pass an anti-racist constitutional amendment. So Monique, why don't you tell us what anti-racism is? Because we had somebody just on Facebook yesterday say, that sounds like a good idea. I want to be an anti-racist.
Well, it's the idea that and Keri, you can come on in and, shoot some wisdom too. It's not just that being not a racist isn't good. That's not good enough. Like, it's not just good enough to love people. You actually need to be doing anti-racist work. So you need to be doing the work of actively dismantling systems that oppress people of color, reading books that speak out against anti-racism or about racism or oppression or systemic injustice. Things like white fragility or how to be an anti-racist and things like that, like constantly learning about, if you're white, how you are part of this oppressive cycle. It's this constant work. Being an anti-racist is just the work of speaking out against oppression and marginalization of people of color.
So it's a technical term that is part of the critical race theory framework. I always tell people, it doesn't mean what you think it means. It doesn't mean, well, I just want to be a good person and I'm not going to burn crosses on my neighbor's lawn.
Please don't burn crosses on your neighbor's lawn. That's horrible. But I also think, though, and would say that it isn't, when you go back to the original idea of critical race theory with like Derek Bell, like back in the late 80s, the term anti-racism, you're not going to find that in the tenets, right. But you will find the idea of anti-racism in the tenets. Like there's the idea versus the terminology, like the actual word itself.
So now Kendi is kind of this modern day anti-racist prophet in our culture right now, of this big voice that's speaking out for anti-racism.
Currently he and Robin DiAngelo are like the king and queen of this ideology.
And from a Christian perspective, it would be Jamar Tisby. And Robin DiAngelo. But the three, I would say, you're right. Like it's on, like they're just right there.
So now let's go to the Politico piece here. He wants to pass an anti-racist constitutional amendment to fix the original sin of racism. And so he wants to set up the Department of Anti-Racism. So he wants to make it unconstitutional for racial equality. Let's scroll down here a little bit. So that all local, state, and federal public policies would be ensured that they won't yield a racial inequity. And that there would be disciplinary tools to wield over and against policymakers and public officials. So all I could think of when I read this was, wow, I'm really glad the founding fathers made it so difficult to amend the Constitution, because this is a crazy idea. So then, Carrie, you tweeted out this. See, Bob's gonna, there it is. Anti-racism is racism. I want to break that down. This is Orwellian newspeak. The Ministry of Truth, anyone, these SJW racists need to start being shunned the way we shun the KKK and not taken seriously and pushed back to the fringe where they belong. So tell us a little bit about this tweet and what you were thinking here.
Yeah, what I was thinking is that I never get asked to distance myself from people who push social justice ideology. It's not treated the same way as white supremacy or misogyny. It's actually currently culturally endorsed and celebrated and pushed on us. And I really think we need to start, like I said, start treating it the same way that we treat racism coming from white supremacists, and that this guy should not be given $10 million from one of the biggest social media companies. his book is currently on the New York Times bestseller list. Same thing with Robin DiAngelo. These guys their ideas are being culturally elevated instead of maligned and mocked the way that we rightfully malign and mock KKK members. And I do think there was an additional tweet where I said, I do think it's possible to treat the people that who are in this ideology with empathy and to pull them out of it the same way that Daryl Davis is the black guy who's pulled over 200 white KKK members out of the Klan just by befriending them, by being that soft place for them to land, right? And by being open to them. And I think you can do the same thing with social justice people, but you don't do it by saying the ideas are okay. You don't do it by, as a culture, elevating and celebrating the beliefs and making it something to aspire to. We are so far from where we need to be in terms of how we treat this belief system, in my opinion. So when I say at the beginning, I'll back up. When I say anti-racism is their word for racism, if you look at what they're telling you to do, they're telling you must treat people differently on the basis of race and also sex and everything. But they're telling you must do that. And that's racist. I don't care if you redefine the term. And philosophically, it's like you can't be down with that because you don't know where it leads. If you think back to, they like to talk about Hitler and Nazis a lot. Okay, well, think back to Hitler. Hitler gave speeches about social justice. This is something I learned from actually a Christian blogger, Samuel Say.
Mm-hmm.
You guys are familiar with him?
Yeah, he's been on our show a few times.
Oh, awesome!
Yeah.
I really dig talking to him.
Yeah.
He was kind enough to come on once. So he wrote this essay about social justice in the gospel, and he put some stuff in there from Hitler's speeches I had never read, where he talked about social justice by name, and he also said things that if you just took Jew out and replaced it with white man, it would sound like what you hear today. But it was basically like this is a privileged group that has oppressed us, and that the way to combat this privilege and systemic bias is it was all the same stuff. Well, where did that lead? And I bet at the time, if you had said, wow, this is wrong, this is racist to be talking about Jewish people this way, there would have been maybe little you could point to in history to say that this could lead somewhere bad at the time. It could, but like, Jewish people own all these businesses and they're, at this elevated place supposedly in society. How could anything go philosophically it's bad and it has the potential to lead somewhere very bad. And in that case it did. And so where we're at now, here's a question I have for social justice warriors a lot is like, okay, let's go with your definition. Let's redefine racism. Let's say it means prejudice plus power, and therefore it's impossible to be racist towards white people. And we're teaching generations of children this now. And when it comes out of the mouth of babes, it loses all of the pseudo-intellectual veneer and it comes out the truth of what the belief system is. It's impossible to be racist towards white people. It's impossible to be sexist towards men. And we must treat people differently on the basis of race and sex. Those are the basic ideas. And that's the way it comes out of kids' mouths once they've learned it. So let's say we teach this. At what measurable end goal, in your opinion, at what measurable end goal will things now be equal enough that it's suddenly possible to be racist towards white people and sexist towards men? And then how do you put the genie back in the bottle? Do you make an announcement like, hey, now it's possible, guys, don't
yes, that's what people. I kept asking Monique.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes. We had 45 fights about that question. And right out here in front of my house was one of them, really? As a matter of fact. Yes.
That question stumps me.
She would get so angry at me. She says, there is no end goal. We're just going to keep working on this until it's there. And I'm like, okay, but how would I know when I've arrived there? What is the measurable outcome?
Yeah. And I like your face.
If you are unfamiliar with Black church, in Black church, when you hear something that you really like, sometimes people just fan you. Don't make me fan you. So now you are getting the fanning. Yes, yes.
Our white Jesus fan.
It's white Jesus on the front.
That's hilarious.
Because hello. But yes, as you were.
Yes.
Anyway, I haven't had anyone successfully answer that question for me yet. And yeah, the part about the practical part about, even, let's say you do have a measurable end goal and we've reached equality now, and now it's possible to be, you know, then how do you teach? Because you've now taught kids who've grown up thinking, you know, this behavior against this race of person is not racism, and this behavior against this race of person is, or this behavior against this sex is not sexism and this one is. How do you roll that back practically, even? And
because you have to reprogram everybody, and like how does that even work?
It's in the, I don't know when we got away from individualism, because that is really the antidote. That's the thing, I think, if you're looking back, that helped us to progress as far as we did and to correct the wrongs and the great injustices, to start correcting the injustices in this country, was individualism. And people want to attack, currently they want to attack, you know, the everything about the founding of this country, but the founding principles are what the abolitionists pointed to make arguments that they're the reason they held the country's feet to the fire and said, live up to what you said you're going to do, live up to what you said you were founded on. And now, and those principles are the things that helped us create progress. And now I think we are regressing, and we're getting away from the things that helped us to make so much progress. And that terrifies me.
Those things that helped us to make so much progress are actually being defined as being racist.
Yes.
You know, so what do you do with that?
Yeah.
And when you were talking about like the Nazis and the Jews, it made me actually think about the idea of Black identitarianism and what happens, because, well, one, there's like critical theory, which is what critical race theory comes out of. There's no meeting ground for unity. Like there's only oppressed and oppressor, and we'll constantly be in this struggle and in this cycle. And so, you know, unfortunately, the way that I feel like race is being pitted right now, it's black and white. And to me, this just elevates this idea of Black identitarianism. Now, I'm not a person to say Black should be on the bottom, you know, like, oh, well, just, you know, my race, or my race, but my ethnic group and my culture should just, you know, be at the hands of racist people or anything like that. I'm not saying that at all. But I do think that there's a problem when we are promoting a Black identitarianism, because when, to me, just human hearts are wicked. And so when you have one group that is now springing up into power, I think that the only place for that logically to go would be oppression. And so, again, it's just an exchange of this, you know, view of oppression, of, you know, how a social justice person would identify oppression. That, to me, is just going to swing the pendulum the other way, and we're going to have oppression over a different group of people.
I like what you said about human hearts are wicked. It makes me think of that Alexander Solzhenitsyn quote about how the line dividing good and evil runs down the heart of every man, of every person. And everyone's capable of evil. The people who think they're not are the ones who terrify me the most, because they're not aware of what they have the capacity to do. Mm-hmm. How do you keep that in check if you're not aware, right?
Yeah.
And yes, I think this ideology, if you look at the Marxism of old and you look at communism, and the people who are going to abuse it are going to be the ones who rise to the top. And there's always going to be someone who's more ruthless than you, but behind, you know, who's going to stab you in the back and then become the leader of this belief system. It's like, I think the way that it's structured, because it's based around power, it's structured to benefit those who are the most power hungry. Yeah. Those are the people who will rise to the top, the ones who are the most power hungry. By the way, this is something I noticed in the ideology and a while back, a few years ago, and now that the ideology has become more mainstream, I'm seeing it everywhere. When a social justice person dies, they don't usually say rest in peace; they say rest in power.
Yes.
And you know how you were talking about, Monique, this oppressed struggle is always going to exist. Rest in power, to me, tells me, one, what you prioritize or value. But secondly, it's such an awful thing to say. Like, even in death, I can't have peace. I have to be struggling for power. Like, give me peace.
Right? The struggle will always go on. Yeah,
Right.
No.
Well, I think you've been so generous with your time, Keri. Thank you so much. I want to go to a quick comment here from Jeremy. He says, my problem with the prejudice plus power equals racism definition is that having power isn't sinful. It's partiality that's sinful from a biblical standpoint. God would see the prejudice as sin, the partiality it's the partiality that needs to be dealt with.
Oh, yeah.
Even without the power. Mm-hmm. And so by redefining racism, they're redefining it in such a way that is inherently in contradiction to the scriptural framework.
Yeah, because you have righteous and unrighteous people in power in the scriptures.
Yeah.
That's a great point. I haven't thought of that before.
So, like,
I'm gonna give her credit for that one. I'll give her the credit because it's real.
Like, for example, you have King David. He was a very powerful man, but he was a righteous man. You have Zacchaeus in the ministry of Jesus, who was an unrighteous but powerful person, but came face to face with the Messiah, changes his life. But he doesn't leave his vocation. He's still the tax collector, but he becomes righteous. Mm-hmm. And so we have examples in Scripture of righteous and unrighteous, rich and powerful people, and righteous and unrighteous poor people. So the problem isn't the power or the riches. The problem is the sinful human heart.
Yes.
And all people have the same fundamental problem, which is sinfulness. And we all need the same fundamental solution, which is the death of Jesus in our place. So it's very important to understand that power is not antithetical to Scripture. Mm-hmm. Neither is being wealthy. Those are, deeply biblical ideas. The problem is how do you live out God's justice standards as a rich person or as a poor person? Mm-hmm. So,
yeah. I'm just going to say that I've taught her everything that she knows. Right. She's come so far.
I like it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy, for that. Well, Keri, you've just been wonderful. Let's talk again about your podcast with your podcast partner, Carter, Unsafe Space. We want to encourage people to go check it out. What are you guys up to? What's your podcast about? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so you're showing a picture of our website, unsafespace.com. We do a couple of podcasts. One's called Deprogrammed, and that's specifically a deep dive into social justice ideology. We usually get to interview people on that show, different experts or people from different backgrounds about social justice beliefs. And we're going to get to talk to Monique soon, which I'm very excited about her story. Yay.
So excited.
That's the program. Then we also do a live daily show, just kind of a news and topical show where we take questions from the audience. And we do that live on Mondays and Fridays. And then we do a book club to try and encourage ourselves and others to keep reading in this day of distraction. And so book clubs, you can be in the video discussion with us. We do them like every month and a half or so. The next one we're doing is tomorrow night. So
very good.
You can find info about all that on our website.
Awesome. Yeah, we like to do book clubs too. So it's a great way to interact with people.
I like the pressure of having to do it.
Yeah. So
what book are you guys going to go through?
So we are currently reading, it was Carter's pick, Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand.
Oh yeah, that's a long one.
I know. We alternate between fiction and nonfiction. So I think the next one we're going to do is probably going to be Yasmin Mohammed, called Unveiled. We had her on the show and she talked about being married to this Al-Qaeda member and like leaving Islam. She's really, you guys should talk to her actually.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very good. All right. Thank you, Keri, so much. You were so generous with us and so gracious. Thank you.
I'll see you soon, Monique.
Yeah.
See you Monday.
Monday. Oh yeah.
Yes. See you Monday.
All right.
Okay.
Take care.
Thanks.
Bye. Well, that was fun.
Yes. I
feel like we made a new friend.
Yes. And I will be speaking with her on Monday. I'm excited.
So all the things family, Center for Biblical Unity family, go support Monique on the big live stream.
Unsafe
It's kind
space.
of the biggest one you've ever done, I think.
Yeah.
Is it going to be pre-recorded?
I think so.
Oh, it's not going to be live streamed?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, bummer.
Yeah.
I was hoping for live stream. I was going to come harass you.
No, please don't. Please don't. Please don't. Like the time that I was doing a podcast and it was live and Krista walked in and I wasn't expecting her to walk in and I screamed so loud because I am completely jumpy like that at times. And yes, I didn't know if I should cut off somebody's ear or if it was like just a friend coming in. And there it was.
Yeah. Oopsie.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk real quick about your blog this week.
Yes.
That you published.
Yes. Let's talk about it.
5 signs that your church may be going woke.
Yes.
So why did you write it? What prompted you to write this?
We just receive a lot of emails in of people asking, my pastor, or people saying, my pastor recommended that we read White Fragility. My pastor is recommending Be the Bridge. My pastor said that we should support Black Lives Matter. Is my church going woke? Like, what's going on? I'm not really sure what's happening. How do I know? And so we received so many that it just made sense to address it in a blog.
Yeah.
And so I did.
It's got a lot of shares.
It's doing well. It's doing well. If you haven't seen it, please check it out. You can look for it on the Center for Biblical Unity website at centerforbiblicalunity.com. And there's a tab on there for blogs, and you can see what I've written, but this is the latest one.
So what kind of feedback have you gotten about it?
I've received a lot of positive feedback. I've had questions. I wasn't sure if my church was going woke. This really gives me some boundaries and guidelines as to, what to look for. And then there's resources and tools as to, well, what do you do if you think your church is going woke? Biblically, I think there's some principles that we could put in place if I think that, my church is going woke. It doesn't mean I have to just jump ship. Oh, Lord, my pastor woke. Let me jump ship. No, like we can have conversations. Yeah. We can do things biblically and you might still need to leave. I'm not saying don't leave.
Right.
I'm just saying that biblically, I think there are some steps before that.
I love it that you had the practical steps at the end of what to do. And I loved your advice of don't gossip.
Yeah.
Believe the best about them. Go have the conversation.
Because the church don't need more people running around like chickens with no necks talking about, he woke. Oh my gosh, did you hear this? Da, da, da. Yeah. Like we don't need that. Like we can do things as we say, or as at least I say, we need to be decent and in order.
Yeah.
Okay? The church needs to be decent and in order if we're going to stand for biblical unity within the church and be an example to the world.
But we're also going to have some brave conversations with leaders and ask some hard questions, but believing the best about them. Maybe they don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe they're uninformed. Resource them.
Yeah.
Encourage them to check things out. So your practical suggestions at the end were fantastic.
Have your hard conversations in a decent and in order way. So your church, your pastor comes up and it's like, this book, Be the Bridge, is really good. You should read it. Don't just hop up off the pew and be like, what you doing? That's heresy. Da, da, da.
Yeah.
Like, give him a minute, schedule an appointment, pray. How about can we start off with some prayer?
Pray.
So I think there's ways that we can do this biblically.
And I think one of the pieces of feedback that I saw that people were like, well, how do I know when it's time to leave my church? Mm-hmm. That feels like maybe it could be another blog post because, I think that's a hard decision because what we're learning is sometimes the Lord seems to call some people to stay and try to be an influence and try to stand for historic Christianity. And then sometimes he calls some people to leave and go to a different, find a different situation. But there's no, it's really hard to, like, we can't tell people on social media, yeah, you should stay.
I am not your Holy Spirit.
That's right.
No, you need to get in a conversation and pray about that. Get in a conversation with the Lord. If you're going to, if you think that he's leading you to leave your church, that's fine. Like, understand that. But, one of the things that someone mentioned maybe earlier this week, I'm not sure who I was talking to, they were like, in the church, in the first 300 years of the church, you had church centers. So this was the church of Ephesus. This was the church at Corinth. And maybe you said this, actually, I'm not sure, but it wasn't so easy to just leave. You know, you had this one church and this was the body of believers and y'all had to sit and kind of hash things out.
There's a little bit of Protestant privilege that you can just go to another church down the street anonymously and start over.
So how do we really, you know, walk some things out and talk some things out?
Jeremy wants to know, what is a chicken with no neck? Justin says dinner.
Ah, yes. Yes. A chicken with no neck. I don't know. I've seen when I lived in South Africa, I would often travel up to Zambia and we'd be in the village and people would cook chicken. So I'd wrangle it up. Chicken with no neck. Dinner. Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
And on that happy note, we're done.
Here's this picture you wanted.
Oh, yeah. Here's our Daryl sent in his picture with his shirt. We couldn't find that any earlier.
Yes,
so,
I'll be speaking with Daryl later in the fall. I think October.
Way to go, Daryl. Showing your pride there in the Center for Biblical Unity.
Loving it.
I saw our friend Chris did a video for his work. I don't want to put him on blast because I don't want to get him in trouble. He works in public schools. But he was wearing his shirt in a video that he did for work. I was like, yes, that's it. So
yes.
go get your merch.
Your shirt. Get your shirt. Right. Or your cup or your, baby onesie, whatever. We got it for you.
Tank tops. Boy, it's hot.
Yes, it is. Oh, I love this weather. Oh, 100 degrees outside is the best. It is the best.
Not me.
Yes.
All right, my friends. Thank you so much for watching, spending your Saturday night with us. We hope you enjoyed the conversation with Keri Smith. Be sure to share the show and pray for your friends. Pray for your friends that are struggling with social justice, your friends, your family. Know that there's hope. The Lord can work with people. And sometimes it takes time. Sometimes it takes 20 years. But things can happen.
Sometimes people are slow learners. Yeah. Don't judge us. No.
All right. Take care.
Have a good night.